Hello. In this presentation, we will be exploring the process of facilitating restorative dialogues. These dialogues are a powerful way to foster connection, accountability, and healing within communities. This presentation is designed to provide you with the tools and insights needed to lead these important conversations effectively. Let's begin. Restorative questions form the foundation of restorative dialogues. These questions are carefully designed to explore experiences, impacts, and the steps needed for repair and healing. For example, we ask those whose actions have negatively affected others questions like, what happened? What were you thinking at the time? What have you thought about since? Who's been affected in what way? And what do you need to do to make things right? For those who have been affected by the actions of another, we ask the questions, what did you think when you realized what happened? What impact has the incident had on you and others? What has been the hardest thing for you? And what do you think needs to happen to make things right? The purpose of restorative questions is multifaceted. They foster connection and empathy, clarify needs for repair, and create space for accountability without blame. Additionally, these questions encourage participants to reflect deeply, express their feelings, and engage in meaningful dialogue that leads to growth and resolution. Notice how expression plays a key role after reflection and before accountability. By creating space for expression, we allow participants to process and share their feelings in a supportive way. As we continue, let's build on what you already know about affect, the innate emotional responses we all share. Our affects, our somatic affect responses, are key to understanding human interactions and fostering healthy relationships. So, this brings us to the Tomkins Blueprint, which introduces 3 guiding principles for emotional health: maximizing positive affect, minimizing negative affect, and ensuring the free expressions of all affect. This concept is deeply connected to restorative dialogues. Donald Nathanson, director of the Sylvan Tompkins Institute, puts it beautifully. It is through the mutual exchange of expressed affect that we build community, creating the emotional bonds that tie us all together. Through restorative questions, we create a space where emotions can be expressed openly and authentically, helping to build understanding, connection, and a strong sense of community. Restorative questions are rooted in principles of restorative justice, which emphasize community healing and accountability. These questions have been and can be used effectively in a variety of settings: in schools, in families, work groups, communities, with friends, in the justice system, in recreational groups. Today, we're focusing on 2 types of facilitated dialogues. First, we have individual conversations where the facilitator is providing a safe space for one person to process their experiences or to reflect on their needs or their actions. The second type is a 2-party dialogue. In this case, the facilitator is guiding the conversation between someone affected by another's actions and the individual whose actions had an impact. Both parties may be reflecting on harm because often in complex relationships and situations, both parties may have an experience of harm. Um, so these parties then are able to work towards mutual understanding and repair. Restorative questions are most effective when harm or conflict arises, trust has been broken, or misunderstandings need to be addressed. They also provide space for expression, which is essential for processing disconnecting emotions like shame. By allowing participants to reflect and share openly, restorative dialogues pave the way for healing, accountability, and strengthened relationships. Inviting someone into a restorative dialogue requires care, intention, and preparation. Begin by acknowledging the situation and its impact, and then state the purpose, emphasizing understanding, repair, and resolution. Here's an example of some invitations. I'd like to invite you to a restorative conversation with the person affected to explore what happened, to understand the impact, and work together toward healing and resolution. This would be a facilitated process to ensure a safe and respectful space for both of you. Is this something you're wanting to participate in? If you, for example, were going to invite somebody who's been impacted by another's actions, you might say, I'm wondering if you'd like to explore with me how you've been impacted by what happened. If so, I'd like to hear about your experience using a restorative process. Are you open to this? Preparation is essential for both the facilitator and the participants. As a facilitator, it's important that you ground yourself through mindfulness or reflection and approach the situation with neutrality and clarity. For participants, make sure you share clear guidelines, provide the restorative questions in advance, and encourage them to review the situation objectively, perhaps using notes from the event. Creating the right environment is key. Choose a quiet, neutral space, or for virtual meetings, you can ensure a professional and calming Zoom type of setup. Emotionally foster a space of respect, empathy, and openness. Allow sufficient time for the dialogue so participants don't feel rushed. When you're together with your participants, begin the dialogue with a grounding exercise like a moment of silence or deep breathing. Then clarify your role as a facilitator and that you are there to create safety and structure and not to mediate or to judge. Remind the participants to speak from the heart, use I statements, and share objectively without judgments or assumptions. Encourage them to listen with curiosity and focus on understanding the heart of the other's experience. Facilitation involves guiding the conversation with the restorative questions. In individual conversations, you'll use a set of questions that's tailored to the participant's experience, whether they were affected by someone else's actions or reflecting on their own. So, some important parts is to make sure that you ask the questions in order. And for each question, after the speaker is done speaking, ask, is there anything else? Before moving on to the next question. Make sure you are listening. Do not reply or reflect between the questions. When all the questions are done, reflect the feelings, the needs, and the requests to confirm your understanding of the other's experience. Hold the space for vulnerability by holding yourself in curiosity and compassion. In two-party dialogues, determine who speaks first based on your instincts about what is going to support the conversation better. Ensure that both parties have equal time to share and guide them through the questions to foster mutual understanding and accountability. So you're first going to decide who's going to go first, and then you're going to take that person through the set of questions that's appropriate for their role in the experience, whether they were the person who was affected by another or whether they were the person whose actions had an effect. You'll guide them through all of their questions. You'll take that time to reflect, um, ref- to do the reflection and make sure that you have an understanding that of what they wanted to express, and that what they wanted to express they have been able to express. And then you'll go to the other party and you'll take them through the other set of questions. Now, like I said before, often in a situation, you might have two people who both have an experience of being affected by the other's actions, an experience of harm because of what the other person did or how they interpreted what the other person did. So it might be that you're going through the sets of questions twice, and you're going to start by, for example, having the first person answer the questions for the person who was affected by another's actions, and the second person answer the questions for somebody whose actions didn't care for the other person the way that they were wanting, and so resulted in the harm. And then you'll switch, and the person who started by answering the questions for the person who's been affected will now answer the questions for the person who acted and whose actions ended up in and or were received as harm by the other person. And I'm careful in using these words about one person did harm and the other person's actions. Or I'm sorry, one person's actions caused harm and the other person was harmed, because as a facilitator, often in these more subtle relational situations, um, the harm may have not been caused. Um, it is caused in a way by the actions of the one person, but primarily it's caused by the understanding the other person has of that person's actions. So they may have a misunderstanding of the intention behind the actions, and it's their misunderstanding that actually created the harm inside of them. So this is for those more subtle situations. Obviously, if somebody commits physical violence, then it's more clear to say that the harm came from their actual actions. But um, often you'll be using these questions in situations where the cause of the harm is less clear. um, but regardless, in life, we act and people experience harm, and we want to deal with it. Whether we had the intention of harm or the realization of what we were doing might cause harm, or even if our actions were really benign, but because that person of where they're coming from and their past experience, they experienced harm, we still want to give them the space to express the harm, the pain, the suffering that they have inside, and be there as the person who, just using uh, a really physical example of my, I'm sitting down and my foot is kind of out a little bit in the walkway, and somebody trips on my foot. I did not intentionally cause the harm. I wasn't even doing anything wrong when that happened. But I'm still going to acknowledge the person's harm and give them the space to share with me how they were harmed, and I still have sorrow for their harm, and I can accept my role in their harm as, yes, they would not have tripped if my foot wasn't there. So I can still accept that I played a pretty significant role in the harm that they experienced, just because I was a human being sharing space with them, just being myself. So if you have questions about that, please reach out to me, because this is a really important piece that some people get stuck on, where they may not be willing to show up as the person whose foot was out in the walkway, because they don't think that they did anything wrong. And objectively, other people will agree that they didn't do anything wrong. And so they don't see that they play a role in the harm that they experienced. But we are human beings sharing space with each other. And simply by being sharing space and being in relationship and being human beings on the planet at the same time, we do share, I believe, responsibility in the harm that others experience. Even if we didn't intend to, even if we weren't doing anything wrong, we can still show up as responsible human beings and give this person care and give them that space to be held and to have their experience heard and valued. All right, moving on. Closing the dialogue is just as important as starting it. Summarize key insights and agreements and invite participants to express gratitude or reflections. Outline any follow up actions. You might want to write stuff down and encourage written agreements when it's appropriate. Aftercare is crucial. It's crucial for you, it's crucial for the participants. So I recommend to the participants practices like journaling, mindfulness, or speaking with a trusted person. And this is something that I'll often speak about before we even get together, is to encourage the participants to have time after our session to take care of themselves, to not just rush right into another thing, but give them some space to do some self-care before they go back into their busy days. For yourself, for facilitators, it's really wonderful if you can personally take time to debrief yourself and reflect on your role and the process. And you might want to engage a colleague in order to debrief. Just remember that these conversations are held in confidentiality. So, in that case, you'd be debriefing your experience and not be sharing anything personal to the people that were involved. So, key takeaways: restorative dialogues do create the space for healing and accountability. Preparation and structure are essential for success. Empathy and openness can really transform conflict into connection, and aftercare is important to support the long term impact and the sustainability, both of the conversation for the participants and particularly for you as a facilitator of these types of conversations. So here are some reflection questions, and so I encourage you to pause right now and reflect on these questions before you end this recording, so that you make sure that you have time for these reflections. Thank you for taking the time, for going through this, and for your commitment to building restorative communities. I'm hoping that together we can, as just human beings, together on this planet, we can work together to foster connection, understanding, and healing. And always, if you have any further questions or you want more resources, please reach out to me.